Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for all the sacrifices that each of you have made and the fact that you're still interested in a country that is for, of, and by the people and not for, of, and by the government. And this is a major time in our country's history. This is still the land of dreams. You know, in recent months, I have been to several different countries, and I'm always interested to get back here to America because people have come here for decades, for centuries, to realize their dreams. My dream was to become a doctor as a youngster growing up in Detroit and Boston. And it seemed like a lofty goal, but something that I felt was obtainable. And when I finally did achieve that dream as an intern and a junior resident at Johns Hopkins, one of the things that really struck me as I went onto those wards, and I would see all of these people, the CEO of this company, the president of this organization, the crown prince of this country, the queen of this nation, frequently dying of some horrible disease. And every single one of them would have gladly given every penny and every title for a clean bill of health. And you begin to realize how critically important your health is. It is the most valuable thing that you have. Everything else pales into insignificance compared to your health. And that's the reason that your health should be controlled by you and not by the government. But when we're talking about things that are important, life is important. And that includes the life of the unborn also. You know, there are those of us in this society who've told women that there's a war on them because that cute little baby inside of them, they may want to get rid of it. And there are people who are keeping you from doing that. And women say, no, they're not doing that to me. No. And they get all riled up and think that somebody's depriving them. Let me tell you something. There's no war on women. You think about it. When a woman is pregnant, what happens? People get up and give her their seat. They get out of the way. They say, you go first. You know, there is great respect and love for pregnant women. There is no war on them. The war is on their babies. That's where the war is. Babies that cannot defend themselves. Over the past few decades, we have destroyed 55 million of them. And we have the nerve to call other societies of the past heathen. Think about that. And what we need to do is re-educate the women to understand that they are the defenders of these babies, not the destroyers of these babies. We need to understand where that is. Well, you know, there were a lot of bumps in the road for me realizing my dream of becoming a physician, not the least of which was the fact that my parents got divorced, and that was devastating for an 8-year-old boy. And let me just say to anyone who's out there who's got children and they're thinking about getting a divorce, please reconsider. Start thinking about those things that you loved about your mate. Don't concentrate on the negative stuff. You know, of course, you take two people from different environments and you put them together, there's going to be some friction. It's like rubbing two pieces of sandpaper together. But you know what? If you keep rubbing them, it gets smooth. You got to stay in there, you know? It's, you know, to have and to hold till death do us part, not like the Hollywood model, to have and to hold until you get irritated with each other. You know, that just doesn't work. And we need to recognize that God created the family structure for a reason. And marriage is a sacred institution by God himself. And there is no reason that man needs to change the definition of marriage. And now it is true that we need to be respectful of everyone's rights. And I personally believe that any two adults have the right to bind themselves legally in such a way that they have visitation rights, property rights, various other rights, but that does not require the change of the definition of marriage. Well, you know, there were other bumps in the road. Poverty. Now, I got to tell you, I hated poverty. I was sure that I was born into the wrong family. There was some mistake here. That is, until my mother, who only had a third-grade education, who got married at age 13, discovered some years later that her husband was a bigamist, worked 2, 3 jobs at a time, leaving at 5 in the morning, getting back at midnight because she didn't want to be on welfare. You know, this woman made us read books. I didn't want to read them. Everybody else was outside having a good time. But she said, you got to read these books, and you got to submit to me written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. But, you know, but people say to me all the time, why did you do it? Your mother was out working. You didn't have to read those books. Yes, we did. Because, see, back in those days, if your parents told you you had to do something, you had to do it. You know? Well, interestingly enough, when I started reading books, something began to happen. I started reading about people of great accomplishment. And I began to notice something. Some of them were born into terrible circumstances, but they had a dream and they were willing to work toward it. And I saw that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. It's not somebody else. It's not the environment. And once I realized that, poverty didn't bother me anymore because I knew I could change that. I said, this is only temporary. And you see, this is what's missing in America today. That can-do attitude that allows people to move up. You know, we have, my pet peeve are those individuals who fancy themselves great champions of the people who are downtrodden in our society. And they pat them on the head and they say, there, you poor little thing. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you have the housing and the food and the health care and all of those things. You don't need to worry about a thing because it's those bad people over there who are keeping you from getting these things, but I'm going to get everything from them and I'm going to give it to you. And all you have to do is vote for me. Not a problem. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who fall for that without looking at the big picture. Because in the big picture, you soon come to realize that you're going to run out of money. This gravy train is not going to last forever. And that a much kinder thing to do is to find ways to empower those people in ways that they can move from the lower rungs to the higher rungs of our society. You know, I want the same advantages for everyone in our society that I was fortunate enough to have. But if we continually keep people in a dependent position, then they're soon going to lose the drive that is necessary to achieve in our society. And this is, in fact, still a wonderful country. It is the pinnacle country on earth. And there have been other pinnacle countries before us. They've risen, they've fallen. They all did the same thing. They became enamored of sports, entertainment, lifestyles of the rich and famous. They lost their moral compass, and they tolerated political corruption. And what happened to them? And it is so important that we learn from what happened to them, because us remaining the pinnacle nation is not only in our interest, it is in the interest of the world. Because if you look through history, pinnacle nations have never before been as benign as we are. And if we go off the scene, we will be replaced by someone who is very unlikely to be as benign as we are. And the world has forgotten what it's like to live under tyranny. And if you live under tyranny that has nuclear weapons and all kinds of weapons of mass destruction, it's going to be even worse than it has been in the past. So we need not only to remain at the pinnacle, but we need to reestablish the correct power structure in this nation. At the pinnacle of power is the people, not the government. This is what we have to change. Unfortunately, what has happened is that people have been beaten into submission. You know, my wife and I travel across the country. We're in a different state every day. Red states, blue states, north, south, east, west, huge enthusiastic crowds. People coming out and saying, you mean there's somebody else who thinks the way I do? You mean I'm not weird because I believe these things? Because I have these values and principles? Because I think logically and use common sense? Because the secular progressives want you to think that. You know, Saul Alinsky has 13 rules, and rules for radicals. The first rule: make the majority believe that their opinion is the minority opinion and that your opinion is the majority opinion. If you can co-opt the media in the process, you're far ahead of the game. That's exactly what's been done, and people are now sort of like looking around. Can I say that? Can I do this? This is total crap. That's what it is, okay? And it's time, it's really time for the people, we the people of America, to stop being afraid of the government and to put it in its place. In its place. Now, this is not to say that I don't like government or that I despise government. Government plays a very important role when, in fact, they believe in the Constitution. That's the problem. When they begin to neglect the Constitution, when they begin to impose their own will, when they look at laws of the land and they say, okay, I think I'll enforce this one I won't. When they begin to treat people differently, they say, these are my friends, you don't have to do that, but all the rest of you have to do something. When they say the people and the executive branch and the legislative branch don't have to participate in certain programs, but everybody else has to. When they give businesses exemptions, but the common people, they say, no, you have to do it. You know, that's not America. That's Russia. That's someplace else. How did we allow that to happen in this nation? And I have to tell you, you know, Obamacare is really, I think, the worst thing that has happened in this nation since slavery. And it is, in a way, it is slavery, in a way, because it is making all of us subservient to the government. And it was never about health care, it was about control. And that's why That's why when this administration took office, it didn't matter that the country was going off the cliff economically. All forces were directed toward getting this legislation passed. And why did they want to pass it so badly? Well, as I said the other night on television, Vladimir Lenin, one of the fathers of socialism and communism, said that socialized medicine is the keystone to the establishment of a socialist state. And you know, that's the problem. And you know, when in 1831, when Alexis de Tocqueville came to America to study this nation, why did he come? Because the Europeans were fascinated. How could a nation already be competing at every level? And after he looked at the government, he said, let's look. And he was blown away. Anybody finishing the second grade was completely literate, could read the newspaper, could have a political discussion, could tell them how the government worked. You only found that in the aristocracy in Europe. And when you stop and think about it, why do you think those early pioneers were able to push across a rugged and hostile terrain from sea to sea? Because they were well educated, to build structurally sound bridges, they knew how to build roads, they knew how to build storage containment centers, they knew how to invent things when a problem came up because they... This we must get to. 30% of people in this finish high school. Think in our high schools, volume set impressed him the most was the fact that we taught in our public schools values and principles. And we were not ashamed to use the Bible as the source of those values. And you know, many other nations of the world, they're not afraid of their religious beliefs. They quite proudly proclaim them. But somehow we have come to believe that we are not a Judeo-Christian nation. We have some leaders who have even made such a proclamation. They don't know anything about the founding of this nation. And you know, in our last book, America the Beautiful, we wrote many of the stories about incredible things that happened during the founding of this nation that were supernatural. And if we try to throw God out of our nation, he will neglect us and we will go down the tubes. We're already on the way, but I think it can be reversed because there are enough God-fearing people in this country, and we must not be ashamed of our relationship with God. And if we do, we're going to lose it. And the last thing that de Tocqueville said is, America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. And we need to understand when we sing our national anthem and we get to that last line of the first verse, and it says, the land of the free and the home of the brave, that we cannot be free unless we're brave. Thank you very much.